A very good morning and welcome to our daily devotion. Today we'll be looking at Psalm chapter 110. First, we'll have a brief overview of the psalm before we take away a small point of reflection. So, turn to your Bibles, either physical or digital, and let's get into it. So, this is a psalm of David, and this is a royal messianic psalm, which is a psalm talking about Jesus or the Messiah. So, from verses 1 to 3, David proclaims that he proclaims that Yahweh's son is to reign Zion with power. And then from verses 4 to 7, he says how Messiah is not just the king but also a priest who has conquered and who will conquer the enemies and judges of nations. And finally, he ends by saying how Jesus will rule over all the enemies. So, what can we take away from this psalm? This psalm is a very good reminder for us talking about covenant theology, or which is Christ, in the sense that this psalm in a way reveals the Trinity, where he talks about Yahweh, he talks about Son, and talks about the roles of Yahweh and the Son. First, in verse 1, he shows how God is promising victory to the Son, and later in verses 4, he says priest forever, which points to Jesus' priesthood. So he talks about how Jesus is a priest and how God is the Father who is sovereign. And then he says how Jesus executes God's justice and he is also a source of grace. And then finally he shows how God's providence and judgment, where in verse 3 we can see your vestures are all fragrant with myrrh and aloes. And in verse 7 he says he will drink from the brook by the way, which is showing how Christ's execution and suffering. And then finally he ends the psalm anchoring our faith in Jesus, who is enthroned forever, which is again, now this psalm is quoted in a lot of New Testament passages. If we delve deeper but we cannot. So in a nutshell, what we can take away is that, not just a takeaway, but it's a reminder that Christ reigns at God's right hand, and that he is triumphant over all our enemies, and our enemies in the sense that sin. Christ is at God's right hand and he has triumphed over sin. So this psalm is a reminder for us in that way, that to let us also know that Christ has triumphed over sin. Now, this previous week in the youth meeting, this was something that we talked about, but briefly to say that we ourselves could not have triumphed over sin, but Christ has done what we cannot do. He has triumphed over sin for us and he has done all the hard work. And this psalm is a reminder that Christ has triumphed over sin and that we as believers stand in awe of him. So in a nutshell, this psalm is a reminder for us to know that Christ is God's right hand and he has triumphed over sin for us. Thank you.